All right, so this is task 21. It's on page 6 in the 8C packet. You don't have to print out the packet. You can just do this on a separate sheet of paper, but you should be writing this down, not just watching the video. So today's lesson is how to find the equation of exponential functions when given 2 points on that function. So an exponential function, the basic setup is y equals a times b to the x. And then at the end, you have added or subtracted wherever the function's leveling off. For us today, all the ones we're going to look at are leveling off at y equals 0. So therefore, we will not have anything added or subtracted on the end. But in the next task, we will see ones where we'll have to add and subtract on the end. But for today, we'll just technically have a plus 0 there, so we don't really have to put anything. Each of these points are an x comma a y. So we're going to fill in that x and y into our equations. So we're going to have 8 equals a times b to the 0. And then we'll have 2 equals a times b to the second. Okay, so now we have two equations. What we're going to do is we're going to divide our equations, and we always want to put the one with the larger exponent on top. This has an exponent of 0, that has an exponent of 2. So we'll put the right-hand equation on top. So we'll have the 2 from the left side of this equation over the 8 from the left side of that equation. And we'll come back, we'll get the right side of this equation, so ab squared, over the right side of this equation, ab to the 0. We'll go ahead and divide the left, and that will give us 1/4. Now the whole purpose of doing this is on the right, the a's divide out, so they're gone. B to the second over b to the 0, when you divide, you subtract the exponent, so that's just b to the second. To get b by itself, we'll take a square root. Square root of 1 is 1, square root of 4 is 2, so b is just a half. Normally we'd have to worry about plus and minus, but in an exponential function you can't have a negative b value, so that's why it's just the positive 1/2. So now what we'll do is we'll go back up to one of the equations, and we'll take this one because raised to the 0 is easier, and we're going to sub back in for b. So we'll have 8 equals a times 1/2 to the 0. Well, anything to the 0 is just 1. So this is 8 equals a times 1. Or in other words, a is just equal to 8. Now, we have to finish off the question because we wanted to know what the equation was. We've got a and b. Now just write out your equation now that we know the a and b. So we've got 8 times 1/2 in parentheses raised to the x. Now, anytime b is a fraction, you have to have it in parentheses. If it was just like, say, a 4, it's your choice whether you want to put it in parentheses or not, but it has to be in parentheses if it is a fraction. So I suggest to lots of people just always put that b value in parentheses, and then you'll be in good shape. Now, the way you check your answer on these is you put this equation in a graphs page, do a Control-T, and check and make sure those 2 points are in the table. If they are, then you know you did it correctly. So you have an easy way to check these, so you should always know if you are right or wrong. Here's our next one. So we'll again start out with y equals a times b to the x. Nothing added on the end because it is leveling off at y equals 0. Okay, we'll again see tomorrow ones where we'll have to add something on the end. We've got our x's and y's. So we'll put in -2 for y equals a times b to the -1 because that was the x value. Then using our other point, we'll have -4 equals a times b to the 0. We want to put the larger exponent on top. Well, 0 is larger than -1, so we're going to put this stuff on top. We'll have -4 over -2 equals a times b to the 0 over a times b to the -1. If we divide on the left, that gives us 2. On the right, the a's wipe out. And we got to be careful here when subtracting the exponents. We're doing 0 minus a -1. So minus a minus actually becomes a plus. So this is going to be b to the first, which is the same as just saying b. So we've got our b value is just 2. So we've got to go back to one of our original equations and sub back in to find a. Well, we want to stay away from negative exponents if possible. So we'll work with the right-hand one. So we'll have negative 4 equals a times 2 to the 0. Anything to the 0 is just 1. So this is negative 4 equals a times 1. Or in other words, a is just negative 4. We're not done yet. We've got to write our equation. So this is really y equals negative 4 times 2 raised to the x. We would check our answer by putting this in a graphs page, do a control T, make sure that each of those 2 points are in the table. If they are, then we can be confident that we did it correctly. I'm going to try a few more of these. So this is still leveling off at 0, so nothing we need to add or subtract on the end. We'll see tomorrow. It's pretty clear. I'll have drawn in the asymptote where it's approaching when it doesn't approach 0. So we'll put in our x's and y's. We'll have negative 3 equals a times b to the 0. And we'll have negative 6 equals a times b to the first. Bigger exponent is in the right-hand one, so we'll put that on top. So we'll have negative 6 over negative 3 equals a times b to the first over a times b to the 0. We'll divide the left side, which will give us 2. On the right side, the a's divide out. We'll subtract our exponents for the b's and get b to the first, which is the same as just saying b. Really, either of these are pretty easy. We'll sub into the 0 one still. If you have a 0, that's probably the easiest. So we'll have 2 to the 0, which is just 1. So we just get negative 3 for a. To finish off, make sure you write your equation. So we've got y equals negative 3 times 2 raised to the x. We can check that by putting in a graphs page, do a control T, see if those 2 points are in the table. All right, we're going to do 3 more practice ones of these in the video, and then we'll give you some to practice for your homework. All right, so here we've got same idea, it's leveling off at 0. So I'm going to jump right to writing the equation. So we're going to have 1.25 equals a times b to the negative 2. And we've got 5 equals a times b to the 0. So 0 is a bigger exponent than negative 2, so that stuff will go on top. So we'll have 5 over 1.25 equals ab to the 0 over ab to the negative 2. This is a 0 here, it's poorly drawn. All right, so in our calculator, if we do 5 divided by 1.25, that's going to give us 4. The a's divide out. And we got to be careful here. 0 minus a negative 2. Minus a minus becomes a plus, so we're really going to have b to the second. We'll take the square root of both sides. That'll give us 2 for b. So we'll sub that back in. Probably the 1 raised to the 0 is easier. So you'll have 5 equals a times 2 to the 0. So that's 5 equals a times 1, which is the same as just saying that a is 5. So write your equation. Y equals 5 times 2 to the x. Put in a graphs page, do a control T, check your points, see if they match. If they are, then you're good. So those 4 are the easiest ones because they give you the y-intercept. The next 2 will show ones that don't give you the y-intercept. So we've got these 2 points now. Again, flattening off at 0, so nothing added on the end. So we'll jump right into the equations. Our y value is 1. Then we'll have a times b to the negative 2. Here, y value is a half, so we'll have the half equals a times b to the negative 1. Negative 1 is larger than negative 2, so the negative 1 stuff will go on top. We'll have a half over 1 equals ab to the negative 1 over ab to the negative 2. Now the reason we're always putting the bigger exponent on top is so that when we subtract the exponents, we'll always get a positive exponent. So if you're getting a negative when you subtract the exponents, then you know you did something wrong. A half divided by 1, well, anything divided by 1 is just itself. Our a's wipe out, and we'll be careful again with our exponents. Negative 1 minus a negative 2, minus a minus becomes a plus. So that's really just b to the first, which is just b. Now, neither of these are easy for subbing in. So let's maybe go with the negative 1 one. So we'll have a half equals a times 1/2 to the negative 1. When you put that in your calculator, make sure you do 1/2 in parentheses raised to the negative 1, and that's going to give you 2, because it flips the fraction. We'll divide both sides by 2. When you put that in your calculator, make sure you get stuff in the fraction in the proper spots, the 1/2 all on top of the fraction, the 2 on the bottom, and we get 1/4 for a. So we'll have y equals 1/4 times 1/2 raised to the x. Put that in a graphs page, do a control T, and double check, make sure both those points are there. If they are, then you know you're in good shape. And I would suggest doing that on the homework, because if they don't match, then you know you have to correct something. So one last one. Notice again leveling off at y equals 0, so we don't have to add anything on the end. So we'll put in our y's, 1/2, then we'll have a times b raised to our x value of 1. Do the same thing for the other point. So 2 equals a times b to the third. 3 is the bigger exponent, so that's going to go on top. So, and this is a poorly drawn 2 here. This is a 2. So we'll have the 2 on top divided by the half. Then we'll have a times b to the third over ab to the first. If we do 2 divided by half in the calculator, again, make sure you get the things in the right spots, 1/2 all on the bottom. You'll get 4 equals, the a's will wipe out. When we subtract our exponents, we'll get b squared. Take the square root of both sides. We'll get 2 for b. And neither of these are too challenging. Maybe we'll sub into the b to the first one. So we'll have a half equals a times 2 to the first. That's just 2. We'll have a times 2. And if we divide both sides by 2, we saw that a second ago, that gives us a 1/4. So our equation, y equals 1/4 times 2 raised to the x. So b should never be a negative number. So if you ever get a negative number for b, you know something is off. And things will work out reasonably nice. Like fractions are okay, but you shouldn't get something that's irrational. But fractions are all right. Those are considered reasonably nice. So that's it for this video. So go to the task 21 and make sure you do the problems now. And remember, this is a 2-day assignment.